So I'm going to give you what will hopefully be a fairly short video blog today, although I have a tendency to talk for a really long time. But basically what I want to sort of talk through really quickly is the differences between Aeschylus and Sophocles as playwrights. So Aeschylus is the oldest, or the earliest rather, Greek tragedian that we have surviving full plays from. Sophocles is the next oldest, or the next earliest rather. So one thing on a sort of basic level, the dramatic nature of Sophocles' work is more complex than Aeschylus' work, because Aeschylus is a fairly early dramatist. So we've got Thespis back in sort of the legendary origins of history, who takes these sort of religious choral odes and adds an actor. Aeschylus is still in the fairly early stages of thinking about plays with actors. Sophocles is a bit further along. His characters are somewhat more developed. His characters have more sort of interactions, and he has more characters. But on a more sort of thematic level, on an ideological level, we have some differences between them. So Aeschylus as a character Aeschylus as a playwright rather, is interested largely in the movement from a sort of primitive culture of violence, a might makes right culture, to a culture run by the rule of law. So the Oresteia trilogy is fundamentally about this shift. So in Agamemnon we have Clytemnestra and Aegisthus, who murder Agamemnon and become rulers of Argos. Middle play, we have a sort of conflict between the Furies, or a conflict between Clytemnestra, who is sort of backed up by the Furies, and Orestes, who has been given word by Apollo that he should go and revenge his father's murder. And then in the Eumenides, we get this debate sort of actually staged in what's basically a trial of Orestes. And you have the Furies on one side, and you have Apollo on the other, and you have Athena in the middle, who's acting as this figure of justice. And everything is decided and wrapped up nicely according to the rule of law. And he has a couple of other plays that are really concerned about like the rule of law and things like this. Prometheus Bound, for instance, is interested in seeing Zeus as this figure of like, I have thunderbolts that I can throw, so I am going to make the law, versus Prometheus, who is this figure of like knowledge and wisdom and progress and things like this. So that's one of the main things that Aeschylus is concerned with in his dramaturgy. Sophocles is, and this is going to kind of be awkward chronologically, but Sophocles is a very Aristotelian playwright. And the reason that's odd chronologically is because Aristotle writes the Poetics about a century after Sophocles. So the reason that Sophocles is Aristotelian is not because he was following Aristotle, but because what Aristotle writes is describing what Sophocles is doing. So Sophocles is very interested in taking these noble characters, these characters who have admirable qualities, and watching them fall through a tragic mistake or through the sort of excess of their own admirable qualities. And we see this in Oedipus Rex, we see this in Antigone, we see this in Ajax. To a certain degree, we see this in plays like The Women of Trachis, which I think is a terrible play, just dreadful. And you can see my blog on that to find out why. But, so what we have in all of those plays is a sort of noble or admirable character whose values, whose strengths lead to their own destruction because of the gods, because of fate. So, Aristotle says Oedipus is probably the perfect play, right? This is his sort of theory, because Oedipus's great strength is his wisdom and his determination to locate the truth. That's ultimately what destroys him, because his pursuit of knowledge, his pursuit of Laius's murderer, is what leads him to discover that he himself is Laius's murderer, and that he's carried out the prophecy to kill his father and to marry his mother. Take a figure like Ajax, somewhat similar. Ajax's greatest strength is that he's a tremendous warrior, incredible warrior. Like, second after Achilles dies, he is actually the strongest Greek warrior at Troy. He's the second strongest after Achilles, but Achilles is dead by this point. So technically he's now the strongest warrior, but for some reason he's always referred to as the second strongest after Achilles. What his sort of tragic mistake is his hubris. So Ajax basically had said before they left for Troy that, oh, I don't really need the gods' help. I'm going to do all of my own feats of heroism. Basically, he's his own stuntman, I guess, in a sort of ancient Greek epic campaign against Troy kind of thing. And then they're actually in battle at one point, and Athena is there, and she's like helping him out, and he's like, hey man, get away. I'm going to fight these dudes on my own. Somebody else probably needs you, but I've got this covered. Athena doesn't really like that. So Athena basically says, you're going down, Ajax. And so Ajax gets really pissed off when he isn't awarded the armor of Achilles. It goes to Odysseus, who really doesn't come off very well in most of the Greek plays, although he's not as terrible in Ajax as he is in many of the other plays. But, so Ajax gets really pissed off, and he decides that he's going to go out and slaughter all of the Greek commanders, Agamemnon, Menelaus, Oedipus, not Oedipus, Agamemnon, Menelaus, Odysseus, and so on and so on. Athena is like, wah, mist over your eyes, so Ajax goes out and destroys some sheep. And he like drags him back to his tent and is like torturing him and whatnot. So his sort of greatness as a warrior is actually the thing that like brings such shame on him that he ultimately kills himself. So this is primarily what Sophocles is interested in, is like the role of personal traits, personal mistakes, personal flaws, which are also a person's greatest strength, and the ways in which those things lead us to our fate. So it's not that like Athena guides his sword as he attacks these sheep. Athena uses his own rage, his own violence, his own greatness as a warrior to lead him to his own doom. And so that's the way that Sophocles is primarily interested in looking at the world. So Aeschylus, again, very much working, or very much interested in working on sort of large-scale social level about the movement from barbarism to civilization in some ways, or the movements from violence to the rule of law. Sophocles interested in a more personal level, a more personal fate, where the thing that makes you great is also the thing that leads to your destruction, and it pushes you to it pushes you toward your inevitable fate.